Shiv, we're seeing images of the French President Emmanuel Macron, who's just touched down in Tel Aviv. This, of course, another very high-level visit from a world leader to Israel, showing solidarity after Joe Biden, Rishi Sunak, the German and Italian counterparts of the leaders as well, who touched down in Tel Aviv. How do you see this visit? Because there's a very tough and a fine balancing act that France needs to do and the French president needs to do between the pro-Israel Anglo-American stance and line that he's adopted as far as this conflict is concerned, and then, of course, the traditional pro-Arab line that France has stood.
You're right, Paulomi. I think Emmanuel Macron, the French president, probably has a much tighter tightrope to walk, proverbially speaking, than perhaps any of the other European countries. Like you said, we had Giorgia Meloni of Italy, we had Olaf Scholz of Germany speaking out as well. But as far as France is concerned, given its particularly high population of immigrants, given the violence that has taken place in Paris and other parts of France recently, domestic politics is also going to have to weigh on Macron's mind. Like Geeta said, I think it's going to be interesting to see whether Macron uses this visit to focus it completely on solidarity with Israel, or also meet other leaders, include Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority, and maybe other regional leaders as well. Remember, even Secretary of State of the United States, Antony Blinken, when he'd come to Israel, also was supposed to visit Jordan. That got cancelled from the Jordanian side, owing to the rising mood within the Arab world. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But France is unique as far as Europe is concerned, Western Europe is concerned, because of its open door policy as far as immigrants is concerned. It's got a very high population of Palestinians. There have been widespread protests in different, French cities over the last few days. Pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian, rioting and protests that have taken place in Paris and other places. And therefore, Macron's not going to have an eye only on his meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He also will have to think about how it looks back home. That's the nature of all of these visits, Paulomi, and we've seen them one after the other. We're seeing it even with someone like, President Joe Biden. The focus today, of course, is going to be on Macron as far as the diplomatic steps are concerned. But if you track everything that someone like a President Joe Biden is concerned, if we're talking about the international world order and the West, his messaging has been, constantly talking about the two-state solution, the right to statehood for Palestine, constantly stressing on the need to avert an all-out humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The sort of Democrat in Joe Biden, after the initial days of sending in aircraft carriers, has emerged, because remember, he's got a election to fight as well. So all of these leaders, and I think it makes a story entirely by itself, and I think your question is pertinent in that regard, that each of these leaders that is coming to show solidarity with Israel is also reflecting their own domestic compulsions. And those domestic compulsions in France's case, as we've just seen over the last few days and weeks, are not small by any measure. There are many places, many pockets of France, that have enormous immigrant populations, including Palestinian populations, Arab populations, and those are no longer, just quote-unquote immigrant populations. These are people with residency permits, these are people with rights, these are people with voting, they've got adult franchise as well, and therefore all of these little nitty-gritty domestic compulsions come roaring at Emmanuel Macron, no matter what he does in Israel today. Obviously, all of these countries have to show solidarity with Israel. The scale of what happened on October the 7th meant that nobody is going to be able to, sit strictly on one side. But I think it's going to be interesting to see whether he also visits the Palestinian president.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be one of the focuses as far as this visit is concerned, though there's no official confirmation. Do you think, he has, of course, worked the phone lines, Shiv, with leaders of Iran, with leaders of Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia as well. But he seems to have lost traction as far as the Arab world is concerned in terms of France's influence in the Arab world, especially after the blanket ban that France imposed on any sort of pro-Palestinian protest, which was then, of course, lifted by a court order.
That is correct. There's a great deal of discontent as far as France is concerned, and I imagine that discontent stretches to other parts of Europe as well. But I think you're right when you say that anger and kind of resentment in the Arab world must be especially focused on France, because France has always acted in extremes as far as the Arab population is concerned. Even if you look at religious symbolism, take it down to stories like the hijab, outright bans on things like that, outright bans on pro-Palestinian protests, for it to be revoked only by a court order. All of these show a kind of a knee-jerk complexion and a knee-jerk quality to the politics there. And I think that's also because the Macron administration appears to be feeling in the dark. These are uncharted waters. This is unknown territory, politically speaking. The Arab population in France has acquired the kind of scale and number where it simply cannot be ignored. Forget about administratively, but also in terms of politically. And, with elections looming for all of these leaders, whether it is Biden, whether it is Meloni, whether it is Macron, this is a terrible, terrible sort of dilemma to actually come out. In the case of President Joe Biden, he's being accused by sections of the American media of outrage without escalation. Those are, of course, the Republicans. Similarly, with Macron's case, he's going to be accused on both sides. It's a bit of a thankless job, politically speaking, especially in France, because he's going to be accused of being soft on terror by his detractors and the right wing in France. And the left is going to accuse him of not showing enough solidarity with Palestine, despite having such a huge Palestinian population in France. So for Macron especially, I think he typifies the modern political dilemma, the reconfiguration of the various international linkages that existed before October the 7th. And I think with all of the words that we're seeing, all of the messaging that we're seeing from people like Macron, and especially in my view, Joe Biden, I think October 7th is going to go down as a kind of line in the sand in international politics. There's always going to be a pre-October 7th and a post-October 7th, especially with how the West deals with the Arab world.
Right. Shiv, thank you so much for joining us from Tel Aviv. Shiv Arur, they're reporting on the French President Emmanuel Macron, who's just landed in Israel to show solidarity with Israel after the October 7 Hamas attack. The French President, they're also meeting with families of those who've lost their loved ones in that terror attack, whose loved ones are being held captive by Hamas in the Gaza Strip as well. Rajesh Pawar is also joining us live from Tel Aviv at the moment. Rajesh, what do you think is the French President's agenda of this visit that he's making after several other top world leaders have visited Israel in order to show their support and solidarity with Israel?
Look, Palomi, as I said when Rishi Sunak was here, I said after Scholz and President Biden, now it's a turn of President Macron to visit, and he will soon be here, and so is he. See, it is a general trend we have seen in the last few years. Whatever foreign policy America decides, generally West Europe follows that. I mean, even if they have some voices of dissent, but generally it's the same policy they follow. And we will see in case of France as well, as President Macron is here, that France will show 100% solidarity with Israel. There will be statements like France shows agrees with the complete right of Israel for self-defense, and Israel can do whatever it wants for defending its citizens and its territory. And it will be on the similar lines of President Joe Biden and Rishi Sunak that we will hear from President Macron. Follow me.
Rajesh, thank you so much for joining us. Rajesh Pawar, they're reporting live from Tel Aviv in Israel.